But how can you have peace when half of you is chained in the basement, banging on the walls, begging to be seen? You don't need to destroy your shadow. You couldn't, even if you tried. It's not the enemy. It's the exiled truth. It's your emotional underworld. Raw, untamed, real. And until you face it, you'll keep mistaking symptoms for enemies. You'll keep blaming the world for your projections. You'll keep calling people toxic, when really, they're only reflecting your unconscious back to you. The shadow doesn't want your obedience. It wants your attention. It wants to be heard, not hidden. To be integrated, not feared. That's why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So look inside, not to judge, but to understand. Not to erase, but to reclaim. Because the parts of you that you call bad might be the very parts that hold your strength. The rage that could become your courage. The envy that could fuel your ambition. The arrogance that could become self-respect. But none of that can happen until you stop running. Because what you run from owns you. And what you face frees you. You think you're fighting the world. You think your exhaustion comes from all the people who don't understand you. The ones who betrayed you. The ones who disrespected you. The ones who seem to live without consequence. But the truth is harsher. You're not fighting them. You're fighting yourself. There's a war inside you. A quiet, constant civil war between who you are and who you pretend to be. Between the person you show and the person you suppress. Between your light and your shadow. Every time you judge, that war flares up. Every time you resent someone, it's your disowned side trying to speak. You feel it as tension in your chest, a tightening in your voice, a flash of rage you can't explain. That's not random emotion. That's your unconscious trying to get your attention. That's your hidden self saying, stop lying about who we are. But instead of listening, you armor up. You justify, you deflect. You call it setting boundaries. You call it self-respect. But if you're honest, sometimes it's just ego warfare. It's your fragile image fighting for survival. You've built a false peace by silencing your darker impulses. You call it control, but it's really tension disguised as discipline. You've mistaken repression for growth, but growth doesn't come from silence. It comes from integration. Carl Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's the tragedy of the war within. You keep thinking life is doing this to you, but in reality, it's you doing it to yourself. You project your denied parts onto the world, then battle the world for showing them back to you. You condemn arrogance while secretly craving confidence. You despise control while secretly hungering for it. You hate dishonesty while lying to yourself every single day. Every judgment is a reflection. Every fight is a mirror. Every wound is a conversation between your conscious and unconscious selves. But most people never hear it. They drown it out with noise, with opinions, with distractions. Because facing the inner war means admitting you've been both victim and perpetrator. It means realizing you've wounded yourself more deeply than anyone else ever could. And that realization, it's brutal. It shatters the comforting illusion that you're the good one. It exposes how much of your identity is built on running from guilt, shame, and unmet potential. But that's also where transformation begins. Because when you stop trying to win the war, you can finally end it. Integration isn't about victory. It's about surrender. Not surrender to weakness, but surrender to truth. To see your contradictions without judging them. To hold your darkness without collapsing into it. You can't destroy the parts of you that disgust you. You can only understand them. And when you do, they lose their power to sabotage you. The war within you doesn't need another soldier. It needs a witness. Someone brave enough to stand in the middle of the chaos and say, "Yes, this too is me." That's what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. The process of becoming whole, not pure, not perfect, whole. Because wholeness isn't about light defeating darkness. It's about realizing they were never enemies in the first place. The war within ends the moment you stop trying to erase half of yourself. It ends when you finally understand that your shadow doesn't hate you. It's begging to be acknowledged. And the day you face it, truly face it, is the day the war ends and the real life begins. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when running no longer works. You think hate is simple. You think it's about them, their face, their voice, the way they walk into a room like they own it. You think your disgust is justified, that your anger is proof of your righteousness. But Carl Jung would say otherwise. He would tell you that what you hate most in others reveals what you've buried most deeply in yourself. That the faces you despise are not strangers. They are reflections. And that the emotion you call hate is recognition. You see, the mind doesn't hate without reason. It hates when it recognizes something it cannot accept. It hates when it sees outside what it has refused to see within. You call someone arrogant because their confidence exposes your own submission. You call someone selfish because you've been conditioned to abandon your own needs. You call someone fake because you're terrified that your entire identity is a performance. You project your inner conflict onto them, and then call it moral clarity. But it's not clarity. It's avoidance. It's the ego defending its fragile image of innocence. Every judgment you cast is a story you tell yourself to avoid the mirror. You build villains out of people so you don't have to face the villain within. Because if you did, you'd have to admit something uncomfortable. You're not purely light. You're not entirely right. You're not as separate from the people you despise as you'd like to believe. That's the first truth you don't want to face. That hatred is self-recognition in disguise. When you hate, you're not rejecting the world. You're rejecting a version of yourself that you've disowned. The loud, the bold, the unapologetic, the cold, the greedy, the ambitious. The parts you were told were too much or not enough. And because you couldn't make peace with those parts, you banished them. You pushed them into the dark corners of your mind, and there, they grew teeth. Now they return to you, wearing the faces of others. So you'll finally see what you've tried to forget. That's why certain people make your blood boil. That's why your reaction feels so personal, so visceral. It's because it is personal. They're not showing you who they are. They're showing you what you refuse to be. The truth you don't want to face is that hate is not the opposite of self-awareness. It's the doorway to it. But you'll never walk through it if you keep blaming everyone else for the storm you carry inside. You'll stay trapped in your projections, fighting shadows, not people. Because until you admit that what you hate is a reflection, you'll keep living inside a house of mirrors, mistaking your own reflection for your enemy. So the question is, how long will you keep running from yourself? There's a part of you that you don't let anyone see. Not your friends, not your family, not even yourself when you look in the mirror. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The sum of everything you've denied, repressed, or pretended to outgrow. It's the voice you silenced to survive. The anger you swallowed to stay liked. The envy you buried to look humble. The hunger you disowned to appear moral. You've built your life around escaping it. Every achievement, every apology, every smile. Carefully crafted to keep the darkness out of sight. You call it self-improvement, but in truth, it's self-erasure. You spent years building a mask so convincing that even you started to believe it was your face. You say you're fine, you say you've moved on, but underneath the mask, something still breathes, something still waits. It's the part of you you've abandoned, and it's not gone. It's patient. Jung warned us that what we refuse to face in ourselves doesn't disappear. It takes control. It shows up in your tone when you're tired. It leaks through sarcasm, resentment, silence. It turns your fear into judgment, your shame into arrogance, your pain into hate. You think you're running from darkness, but the truth is, the darkness is keeping pace. It knows every route you take. Every time you try to escape it through perfection, through control, through denial, it smiles. Because every attempt to escape only feeds it. That's how the shadow works. It doesn't punish you. It balances you. And when you refuse to acknowledge it, it becomes your puppeteer. You can see its fingerprints everywhere. In the people who trigger you, in the habits you can't break, in the patterns that keep repeating no matter how much you grow. It's there in the anger you suppress until it explodes, in the guilt you feel for wanting more, in the subtle, unspoken disgust you carry toward yourself. And here's the cruel irony. The more you try to be good, the more power your shadow gains. Because goodness, when built on repression, is just fear wearing a halo. You say you want peace, when every disguise feels heavy, every excuse sounds hollow, every distraction tastes like dust. You look at your life and realize you've been circling the same mountain, calling it progress. That's when it happens. The confrontation. Not with them, with you. You can't hide behind your opinions anymore. You can't call your projections boundaries. You can't keep dressing your fear in moral language, because deep down you know that the people who provoke you are not coincidences. They're catalysts. They're the pressure that cracks your mask. They are your unwanted teachers, the ones sent to drag you into honesty. Carl Jung said, "One does not become conscious by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means growth doesn't come from pretending to be good. It comes from having the courage to look at your own corruption without flinching. So look at the people who trigger you. Ask yourself, what part of me are they waking up? What emotion do they expose that I keep buried under politeness, intellect, or pride? Maybe it's the rage you never allowed yourself to feel. Maybe it's the envy you were taught to be ashamed of. Maybe it's the hunger for control you've denied in the name of humility. Whatever it is, stop running from it. Because avoidance is still a relationship. It's just a dishonest one. The only way out is through. You have to sit with your contradictions, hold the tension without rushing to fix it. Because if you run too soon, you'll just find another mirror, another person to blame for what's yours to face. Confrontation is not about self-punishment. It's not about tearing yourself apart. It's about truth. It's about looking yourself in the eye and saying, "Yes, I am capable of anger. I am capable of envy. I am capable of deceit." And that doesn't make me unworthy. It makes me human. This is the point where most people turn back, because to confront your shadow is to lose your illusions. You'll lose the comfort of being the good one. You'll lose the moral high ground you used to stand on. But what you gain is authenticity. You can't become real while clinging to who you pretend to be. You can't know peace while half your soul is still on the run. And yet, this confrontation is not violent. It's merciful. It's the first act of self-respect. It's you saying, I will no longer live divided. When you confront your shadow, you don't destroy it. You integrate it. You give it form. You give it language. You make it conscious so it no longer needs to sabotage you to be seen. Because here's the truth Jung knew. What you repress will rule you. What you face will free you. So stop pretending you're above the darkness. Stop telling yourself you're not like them. Because the minute you say that, you've already surrendered to arrogance, another mask of the shadow. You're not meant to be pure. You're meant to be whole, and wholeness demands confrontation. So when that mirror appears again, when someone's existence sets your blood on fire, pause. Don't lash out. Don't retreat. Don't justify. Just look. That discomfort, that anger, that judgment, that's not the enemy. That's the door. And behind it, the part of you you've been searching for your whole life is waiting, quietly, ready to be seen. There's a moment in every transformation when the pain of staying the same burns hotter than the fear of change. You feel it first as pressure, an ache in your chest, a restlessness beneath your skin. It's not depression. It's not anxiety. It's your soul demanding evolution. You've spent years trying to control your darkness, labeling it, denying it, moralizing it. But there's something in you now that refuses to stay buried. It wants air. It wants movement. It wants to burn everything false. That's the rising fire, not the fire of destruction, but of purification. The kind Jung spoke of when he said that only by confronting the unconscious can one become truly free. Because every part of you you've rejected is energy. Raw, volatile, waiting to be reclaimed. And when you face it, when you stop suppressing it, that energy transforms. What once felt like hatred becomes clarity. What once felt like shame becomes power. What once felt like chaos becomes direction. You start to see that your anger was never the problem. It was the silence that followed it. You realize your envy was never evil. It was a distorted form of desire, asking for permission to live. And your arrogance? It was just confidence hiding behind fear. That's when you understand. You were never broken. You were just divided. Half of you fighting to be seen, the other half fighting to stay invisible. The rising fire is what happens when you stop choosing sides. When you let the light and the dark sit at the same table. When you stop punishing yourself for being human. It's not a peaceful process. It's raw. It's violent. It's honest. It feels like everything familiar is dying. Because it is. The illusions, the roles, the old identities. All of it burns. But what remains after the fire is real. This is where most people turn away. They feel the heat and call it danger. They confuse transformation with destruction. But Jung knew what you call destruction is often the birth of consciousness, the death of delusion, the rebirth of authenticity. And once you've tasted that fire, you can't go back. You can't go back to pretending you don't know yourself. You can't go back to playing small to stay likable. You can't go back to blaming others for your own projections. Because now you see that hate was never your enemy. It was your teacher. You see that your triggers were invitations. You see that everything you resisted was pointing you toward your wholeness. This is what the rising fire gives you. A clarity so sharp it burns through self-deception. A power that comes not from control, but from understanding. You no longer need to dominate your darkness. You can stand in it, breathe in it, own it. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop judging. You start discerning. You stop fearing who you are. You start becoming who you were always meant to be. This is the fire that forges the self. It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you true. And truth has a frequency that cannot be faked, cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken. There comes a point when everything collapses, not as punishment, but as purification. The mask cracks. The lies you told yourself no longer hold. Every illusion, every justification, every identity you clung to begins to crumble under the weight of truth. You thought you were breaking down, but you were breaking open. That's what rebirth feels like. Not light descending from the sky, but fire rising from the ruins of who you used to be. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The journey of becoming whole, of integrating every part of yourself, even the ones you swore you'd never look at again. And this is where it happens. The turning point. The moment when the war within becomes peace. Not because you've defeated your darkness, but because you've claimed it. You stop apologizing for your depth. You stop explaining your fire. You stop dimming your truth to make others comfortable. You realize you were never meant to be pure. You were meant to be complete. You look back and see that every person who triggered you, every enemy who mirrored you, every hateful thought that poisoned your mind, was part of your initiation. They weren't obstacles. They were invitations. They pushed you toward the one confrontation that matters, the one with yourself. And when you finally face it, something inside you changes. You no longer flinch at your reflection. You no longer shrink from your own potential. You no longer need validation to know your worth. Because you've met the darkest parts of yourself and survived the meeting. You've looked hatred in the eye and recognized it as misplaced love. You've looked shame in the eye and seen it as unclaimed power. You've looked fear in the eye and heard it whisper, "I was only trying to protect you." That's what rebirth really is. Not a new life, but a new way of seeing life. Not a better version of you, but the truer one. The one who doesn't hide behind politeness. The one who doesn't drown in guilt. The one who can hold contradictions. Strength and sensitivity. Logic and chaos. Control and surrender. Without tearing apart inside. That's freedom. Not escaping yourself, but embracing yourself so fully that no one else's opinion can define you again. This is the moment when hate loses its grip, because you've reclaimed what it was feeding on. You've pulled your energy back from the projections, from the judgments, from the endless stories of who's right and who's wrong. You see now, there was never another. It was always you. Your fear, your desire, your reflection. And in that realization, something ancient in you exhales. For the first time, you feel stillness. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of alignment. You've stopped fighting your shadow. You've invited it home. And in that union, a new self is born. Not innocent, but wise. Not unscarred, but unbreakable. Not pure, but whole. This is your rebirth. It's not a clean beginning. It's a conscious one. The ashes of who you were are still warm, but from them rises something real, something alive, something unstoppable. You've integrated what you feared. You've accepted what you hated. You've become what you avoided. And now, you are free.